Hello everyone and welcome to the CSS Security mini briefing video where we will present a short summary of what was released today, June 8th, 2021. My name is Josh Daniel and I'm a security program manager in the customer service and support organization here at Microsoft. We're going to start this video with an overview of the release, talk about an issue that's been in the news lately, and then we'll dive into a few vulnerabilities. Please note that the details of the vulnerabilities we're covering in this video may change, and the authoritative location for information will always be the online content in the Security Update Guide. So when we look at our release for June, we have 50 total vulnerabilities that are being addressed this month, which is just around half of our average over the past 13 months of 95. So that lowers the total count of some of our other vulnerabilities, such as critical. We only have 5 this month, where we normally see 13 vulnerabilities. Same thing with remote code execution vulnerabilities. This month, we see 17 total our remote code execution vulnerabilities, where our average is around 29. When we look at the max score, the CVSS score, this is a scaling system between 0 and 10. The highest rated vulnerability this month is a 9.4, which is right around our average. And we'll talk about that one in a few minutes. When we look at the average CVSS scores across the entire release, across all 50 vulnerabilities, our average is 7.18, which is just a little bit below our average of 7.26. Publicly disclosed vulnerabilities, this month we have 2, which is right around our average. Now, when we look at the number of vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited at the time of release, this month we have 6, which is quite above our average of just over 1. And so we'll talk about one of those in a few minutes. When we look at the products themselves that are being addressed this month, as you can see in this chart, our Windows products are there at the bottom, and then products that we may not service every month are at the top. For example, the Malware Protection Engine, otherwise known as Defender. We a couple vulnerabilities being addressed this month. We have .NET and .NET Core that make the list this month. Visual Studio has a small number of vulnerabilities. Office has a handful of vulnerabilities. And then as we get into the Windows, we see vulnerabilities in multiple classes. We have remote code execution, elevation of privilege, information disclosure, security feature bypass, and denial of service, all making their marks on the Windows products this month. So while the number of vulnerabilities is lower than normal, we still have a handful of vulnerabilities this month that do meet a critical bar, if you will, of things that you need to take a look at. And we'll take a look at those in a few minutes. But next I want to talk to you about something that's been in the news lately, specifically malware attacks. So Microsoft, we've documented and published a lot of information on what customers can do to protect themselves against malware. And for example, Tom Burt has a Microsoft on the Issues blog. I'll put a link in the video, and it talks about some of the challenges that businesses face today and some of the things that people can do to protect themselves. And I could make a whole video just about talking about malware and things to watch out for and things you can do to protect yourselves. But I'll distill it down to just 3 top things, right? Now, of course, installing updates is something that I'm going to talk about. That's exactly what this video is about vulnerabilities that are in software updates from Microsoft. But I would just advise customers to look a little bit beyond one vendor and have a robust patching scenario, not just for Microsoft, but also your other downstream products, whether it's Google or Apple or Siemens or whomever. Have a process that makes it easy for the people that are installing patches to do that. If it takes your team 3 weeks to deploy the updates, that means they only have 1 week of time in a month where they can get other work done when they're not bogged down into installing updates. So I know from my personal experience, installing updates can be extraordinarily painful and difficult and challenging in ways that are hard to imagine sometimes. But I also know from experience that moving to a system that was easy, where taking down an entire fleet of virtual machines had no effect on production, that was a great momentous occasion, because it allowed me and my team to focus on other things and securing other things, and not just worrying about patches. So again, look into your process, and if it's challenging, look for ways to improve the process, both in ease and function, as well as timing as well. If you can condense that cycle, that gives your team more time to look at other things. So the next thing I'll talk about is phishing. One of the most common ways that attackers and threat actors get into environments is through phishing. Whether it's a targeted phishing like spear phishing, or whether it's just broad-based or somewhere in between, phishing has become a huge problem globally. And it is such a problem because it works. It just works. And it's easy for threat actors because they can send out dozens or hundreds or millions of communications, and it only takes one human to click on that link. So in your organization, educate your employees on the risks of clicking links. Train them not only what to look for, but how to report suspicious links as well. So that way your organization has more information coming in and more visibility about what's going on in the mailboxes of your individual employees. So do everything you can to protect yourself against phishing. It's one of the top vectors that threat actors use to come in. And lastly, multi-factor authentication. If an attacker is able to get the credentials of one of your system admins with high-level, wide-scale permissions, if you have multi-factor authentication, that can prevent that threat actor from even using and leveraging those credentials. And moreover, if you have just-in-time access across your environment, that's even one more step that makes it challenging for threat actors who already own credentials, because they can't use those credentials in an easy way. So again, install your updates on everything you can, not just Microsoft, everything. Protect your organization through phishing, including educating your employees on the risks to clicking those suspicious links. And then finally, make sure to put multi-factor authentication on anything and everything that you can. I know it's a challenge. I know MFA can slow down things if a person has to look at their phone or their USB key or some other way where they're getting that number, and then they got to put the number in. And I know it slows everything down. I understand that, but it allows a much better security posture that can protect you if some of your other layers are compromised. Okay, so let's take a look at at a handful of vulnerabilities from this month. So obviously we don't have enough time to cover every vulnerability. So what we try and do is find the vulnerabilities that we think customers might be the most curious about, or have questions about, or maybe the most impactful, or perhaps are making news cycles. So this month, the first vulnerability we'll talk about is CVE 2021-31962, and this is a security feature bypass vulnerability in Kerberos. So that's bad, right? That's an important class vulnerability that was responsibly disclosed to Microsoft, and there are no known exploits out in the wild. Base score 9.4 out of 10. This is our highest rated vulnerability this month. So anything that talks about having a bypass of a major security protocol it should be cause for some alarm, and this is no doubt that scenario. So please prioritize patching this month, if nothing else, then for this vulnerability here, which affects not only server versions but also Windows clients and Windows servers as well. So if you have any kind of versions of Windows or Windows servers in your environment, this is something you want to take a look at this month, again, to prioritize patching if you can. As of now, there are no known mitigations and there are no known workarounds for this vulnerability. So next, we'll take a look at CVE 2021-33739. This is an elevation of privilege vulnerability in the DWM core library. This is another important class vulnerability. This one is publicly disclosed, and exploitation has been detected on this. So again, not only is it known about, I believe there was maybe some Twitter exchanges on it, but we've also noticed limited exploitation out in the wild on this. So this has a base score of 8.4, again out of a total of 10. So not the highest rated this month, but still elevated. No mitigations, no workarounds. It only affects the newer versions of Windows 10, as well as Server Core 2004 and 20H2. Again, no mitigations, no workarounds. The good one thing to be pointed out here, though, is that because this is an elevation of privilege vulnerability, it means that it requires an attacker to already have that toehold in the environment. They already have to have system credentials. So keep that in mind when we're talking about phishing and stealing credentials. That's how these kind of things work together. So install the update, block that threat vector entirely, and it's as easy as installing the update. All right, so let's take a look at the final vulnerability we'll talk about today. This is CVE 2021-31977, and this is a denial of service vulnerability in Hyper-V. This is important, privately disclosed, no known exploits out in the wild. It affects not only server versions, full OS of 2016, 2019, server core versions as well. Also, any version of Windows 10 that has Hyper-V installed is also at risk here. So base score 8.6 out of 10. The attack vector is over the network, attack complexity is low, no privileges required, and no user interaction is required either. So how this works, how an attacker would leverage this, is that they would send what we call a specially crafted message to the Hyper-V host, and the guest VM at that point in time, when it receives that message, it could leak information. And in most cases, this would result in a memory leak on the Hyper-V host. And at this point, there's some hardening built into the virtualization stack. So if it sees this behavior, the machine goes into a controlled crash. Essentially, it goes into bug check. And so it crashes on purpose by design to prevent this kind of pattern, this usage behavior resulting with code execution or privilege elevation. So again, an attacker could leverage this vulnerability today, and they would not get code execution, they would not get privilege elevation, they would only crash the Hyper-V server, which is bad if you are hosting lots of virtual machines, but it's denial of service and not those higher risk categories, such as code execution, privilege elevation. So no mitigations, no workarounds. The go-do here is install the update on any machine that's running Hyper-V, and you'll be protected from this vulnerability. All right, with that brings us to a close for today. I want to thank everyone for your time coming in and listening to me talk. And with that, I'll talk to you next month. Thank you very much.